Happy holidays, everybody. I trust that everybody had a great Thanksgiving and are getting ready for Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, everything that we celebrate in this time, especially in this time of COVID. I know it's a little different. Just wanted to welcome you guys, and we're going to jump into our agenda in a meeting, approve the minutes in a minute. But I see Mary Louise with us, and we always have conflicts. So Mary Louise, I'm not sure you had an opportunity to introduce yourself to the rest of the task force members. So I want to give you that opportunity right now. Can you guys hear her? I can't hear her.
We can't hear her.
Okay.
Is your audio joined, Mary Louise? Have you joined with audio?
No, we're still not. I'm thinking, because I don't see a mute or a mic at all on there, so you might not be joined with your audio. That might be, Erica, you think that's what it is?
I do. I'm going to put my phone number in the chat. If you want to call me, we can get you set up. And Ms. Devine, if you want to come back to the introduction, okay, we'll get her up and running.
I will do that. Okay, so great. Okay, so with that, you guys attached to the agenda, Erica submitted our minutes from our October 13th, 2020 meeting. Hopefully everybody has had an opportunity to review that at this point. So if there's no amendments or changes to that, I will now entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the October 13th meeting.
Move for approval to accept minutes from previous meetings.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved for approval from Lala Anna Sauls and seconded, I think, both by Dr. Brian Grady and Jeff Larimore. Any questions or discussions? Seeing none, if all those in favor of approval of the minutes say aye, or raise your hand if you're on mute.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, great. Thank you, guys. So now I'm really excited. After our last meeting in October, Mr. Gunnels, a member of our task force, hi, Dylan, thank you for being here, called me and reached out and just said, you know, I have an idea of a presentation I'd love to make. And so, and he wanted to introduce us to Lauren Taylor, who is the CEO of the Haven Group, to make a brief presentation. And so at this point, I want to just go ahead and turn it over. Dylan, do you want to say anything and then introduce Lauren, and then she can get started?
You're going to put me on the spot, Ms. Devine. No, I will let her dig right into it. I will just say that I was introduced to Lauren, I guess it's been over a year ago now. And if you don't know Lauren Taylor and what she's doing in our community, you need to know Lauren. You need to know what the Haven is doing, because they're doing some incredible things, not only from a private sector perspective of entrepreneurship and economic development, but also what they're doing to help people and try to partner with the public sector and the nonprofit sector. So Lauren is a powerhouse, and she is really making strides to get things done. But what I love about her, and of course Jen, who just so happens to be my aunt, but they are both incredible entrepreneurs. But again, they have a servant's heart, and they believe in helping people along the way. So I really think that the presentation that I've seen from them is a unique strategy to combat what we are hoping to combat as a task force. And so I hope that you enjoyed as much as I did.
Okay, great. Thank you, Dylan. And Jen, thank you so much for being here as well. So Lauren and Jen, I will turn it over to you guys. I think you have worked with Erica. Erica, are they able to share their screen, or do you have their presentation?
Lauren can share her screen, or I can put it up if she needs me to.
I can share it.
Thank you.
It's getting me to change my system preferences.
I can put it up for you. You can just let me know when you're ready to switch screens.
I think it's pulling up. Let's see if this does it.
All right.
There we go. Can we see?
Yes, we
Yes.
can.
Perfect. So before we get started, I'm going to dive into the presentation so we have plenty of time for questions. But just to give you a brief rundown of who we are and kind of what we're looking to do. We've been in the institutional single-family rental space. I have for pretty much my entire career, so about the last 13 years. So we would work with large funds, both big and small, that were raising money in the private sector, mainly from high net worth individuals, family offices, and the like. And then they were buying single family rental properties and turning them, kind of going through the process of leasing them and then reselling them on the back end. We've learned a lot of valuable lessons over the years. I think the industry, when it first started, was really exciting. It was the main reason why I was attracted to it. It was brand new. We had seen large scale rental organizations in the multifamily sector, but not in the single family sector. And so this was something that really hadn't been done before. And initially, I think it was very well intentioned, but along the way, we've seen all of these different changes that we'll kind of go through in the presentation that have put us in a position where we wanted to be a part of the solution and not a part of the problem. And it honestly started to feel like we were just kind of contributing to the overall issue of housing affordability. So we took a pretty big risk this year and repositioned ourselves towards really going after solving affordable housing. That has been also a direction we've taken on the property management side. We can officially say now that we got the contract with Columbia Housing Authority, and we'll continue trying to get Housing Authority contracts to try to make a difference in that direction. So what we're calling this is real estate liquidity for affordable housing. And one of the issues that I found along the way is that there is a lack of liquidity overall in the marketplace, and we'll dive a little bit more into that. So to give you an idea of what we are going to be doing, we will purchase, renovate, and lease single family or 2 to 4 unit housing to offer as rental properties for the underserved affordable housing market through our iBuyer platform, MLS, and auction. So traditional buying metrics, similar to how we operated for funds. In the past 2 years or so, we've done almost 2,000 homes for individual funds or high net worth individuals. And we're kind of taking those skills to reposition them towards affordable housing. So as we know, it's a kind of epidemic level social need that we're seeing at this point. And we intend to provide investors on the for-profit side with a return and build kind of a unicorn in the industry from an affordable housing perspective. The biggest reasons why we're different in the industry at large is there is a huge demand for single family affordable options. In the majority of cases, a lot of you guys are probably familiar with things like low income housing tax credit properties or things that are kind of down the avenue of affordable solutions that give investors tax incentives. We also run an opportunity zone fund, so we're seeing different options in those directions. But in single family, for the most part, it's widely underserved, and we'll get a little bit more into why that is. We're vertically integrated. We have been vertically integrated from day one of starting the company, meaning that we can run the brokerage or acquisition aspect, the renovation aspect, and the property management side. That gives us operating strength and allows us to scale really quickly. By staying on the single family side, we're kind of eliminating the risk associated with having to develop new properties. It'll also help us to reposition areas very strategically that are being greatly ignored by large-scale investors because the numbers don't really make sense within their particular models. And of course, on the nonprofit side, we get all of the nonprofit benefits associated with being able to keep things in truly affordable ranges while also providing social services to the people that we'll be working with. The problem, all of you guys are pretty familiar with this, being on the task force, so we're not going to spend a ton of time here. But when I started digging into this in great detail at the beginning of the year, I really was baffled by how large it's become. And there's a lot of different contributing factors. So we're not seeing any signs of improvement. The map kind of shows overall on a nationwide scale, housing affordability is a problem everywhere that people live. It's not just a problem anymore in California and Texas and New York and all these large markets where in the majority of cases, people were saying, of course, income has risen, and so people are having a hard time there. This is down to small, localized markets, tertiary markets, pretty much anywhere. The National Low Income Housing Coalition estimates we have a shortage of about 7 million homes, and that's just in low income, extremely low income markets. So we're not even close to touching the issue that's now creeping into the middle class, which I think is the most shocking aspect of housing affordability, is that now it's contributing to the overall working poor because we're seeing the middle class get pushed more and more, which this has a lot to do with these particular items here. So we're seeing home values are growing 4 times as fast as wage growth, and rents are growing twice as fast. And this is really tied to the financial markets for the most part. It has a part to do with financial markets and a part to do with government regulation. So you're seeing this giant increase of values that aren't tied to how well people are doing. They're really tied to the secondary market from a financial perspective. And for those that aren't familiar with the secondary market in rental properties has become more and more prevalent as the industry has grown. Initially, you had people raise private equity. They would use that private equity to purchase homes, and then they had to find creative financial solutions in order to kind of double, triple, quadruple their money. Now the majority of single family funds are levered anywhere from 7 to 11 to 1, meaning that should sound familiar to previous banking issues we had at the housing crisis before. They are doubling down because financing is becoming increasingly easier. Fannie Mae decided to back the single family rental institutional market, making financing even easier for them. The issue there is that if I'm going to purchase property that I want to offer for rent, then I not only have the obligation to my investors, so I'm going to raise money from investors and tell them I can give them X return. So I need to make sure that I can give them that return. Then I also have a waterfall on the back end, typically, meaning that anything in excess of that return gets split between me as the fund owner and the investors themselves. But if I want to get debt on those properties, which I really have to make the model work and to scale and provide the returns that I'm promising that I can do, then those lenders are going to require me to have a certain income ratio on the properties that I'm getting financing on. So when I approach them, they are wanting to see a certain makeup of the portfolio in order to give me a certain debt to income ratio to get the lending that I really want to get. And most of these funds are pulling back out anywhere from 70 to 100%. Our prior client was financing 100% of their cash invested back out of the properties. So they're recycling their capital over and over again. But in order to do that, they need to inflate rental values. So things must go up in value over time, not only the value of the property, or the ARV of the property, but also the rent income of the property. So they'll force inflation on those assets by doing things called like portfolio manipulation, where they will, for example, a fund will tell us they want to rent this particular asset. Our property management team will tell those individuals, well, that's a $1,200 a month property. They will say, well, we want it to rent for $1,350, so put it on the market for $1,350. They'll wait 60 days while it sits on the market. We don't get any traction. So then they'll say, well, let's offer some form of incentive. If you go on Zillow, you'll see this all over the place, a free month's rent to sign on a property today. So realistically, then we're taking that $1,300 a month and we're stretching it across the 12 months with a month missing. So realistically, they're not getting $1,300 a month, but on paper, it looks like they are. And so they're forcing this inflation up and up over time. And every time they move a tenant out, they up the rent again. Or they do rent increases on their existing tenant base, which is causing this steady inflation over time. The investor purchases are also playing a pretty major role. The majority of purchases since the housing crisis have been from institutional or private investors, and we're seeing a dying out of the mom and pop kind of traditional real estate investor, localized investor over time. We also see a big shortage in not just Section 8, but across all any type of HAP or other government incentive program. The amount of inventory available for those programs is going down significantly over time. Section 8 last year was around $22 billion. And only about 50 to 60% of those units were actually placed with an individual. The issue with that is that your institutional or large-scale investors do not believe in the model. There's a lot of stigma behind it. That's a pretty loaded bag, but they are consistently deciding not to entertain any form of voucher on any property that they manage. And now that they control the majority of the active inventory available, especially in the single family sector, they are not at all meeting the demand overall for individuals. So we hope to help kind of solve that problem. So our solution, this is a pretty extensive and a little complicated model hack. I've worked on both the fund side of the business and the operations side of the business. So we internally have all of the resources available to run an operation for a fund. So the last largest client that we had, we scaled them from, they started out with 0 properties. We got them to about almost 1,900 properties in 18 months. And we did all of the acquiring of those properties, renovation of those properties, and management of those properties. So our operations arms are strong, and we feel that they would be a good attribute to the nonprofit overall. So the nonprofit and the for-profit are separate from each other entirely. Legally, they have to be, as everyone knows. The nonprofit will own all of the homes. So it is the one that maintains the ownership of the property and the overall decision-making of the property itself. And our for-profit arm will run the operations of those properties, We'll run the operation of those properties, and it will also create a lending arm or liquidity back to the nonprofit. What I found in the majority of cases is if we start out as a traditional nonprofit in the affordable housing space, we're greatly limited by our ability to get grants, donations, and everything that a nonprofit typically has to run its operations. We do not have access to private equity liquidity in the same way that large-scale funds do. So you need to find a way to tap into that resource to really scale at the same rate that your large institutionals do. If we're going to combat the problem, then we have to figure out a way to acquire and to scale and grow as fast as the other aggregators in the space are. So our lending arm will lend money to the nonprofit. The nonprofit can service that debt easily. We are initially now trying to raise money into the for-profit, but what we're open to and what we're hoping to achieve in the short term is to get loans from individual banks. We'll still go after grants and donations, all the typical things that we would, but we're also approaching smaller banks and asking them if they would do debt to the nonprofit. It'll help us overall prove our model and how it can scale over time with the appropriate amount of liquidity. So the nonprofit is basically a captive client to the for-profit side. And the debt venture will lend money to the nonprofit and collect fees and interest and potentially sell it on the secondary market. So we're trying to make all of the negative attributes that are causing this inflation and fast growth within the space to our advantage to help solve the problem in the opposite way. So we think that we can harness the power of the private market in order to further the overall mission. Our track record, I kind of went over this a little bit already, but as a quick rundown, we've done, over 2,000 homes in 24 months. We've had a iBuyer platform that did about 40% of our purchases overall. That was a very elementary iBuyer platform. We've leased 2,500 homes, maintained great collection rates, occupancy, and a good Google star rating. We are definitely, and Ms. Gunnels, who's my COO, she has been one of the biggest contributors to building a great culture here. We started internally with a good culture mindset that we wanted to have a positive environment for the people that were working with us and that were not only working for us, but also working with us on our overall resident base. We wanted to create a good experience for them. And one thing that was frustrating for us is that we have noticed in the affordable housing space, especially in the for-profit affordable housing space, that the service is lacking. They don't get as much attention, and they're kind of forced to be in properties that need increased maintenance or that are run down, when that really shouldn't be the case. If operations are tight and you run it as a fund would be ran, where you're watching every dollar and cent, then you can give all of that increase back to your residents. Renovations, we've done around 1,500 homes, and we scaled to about 14 different MSAs in about 16 months, so we can duplicate our model very quickly. Our strategy is a little different. We'll start with homes first. Most people start in the multifamily sector because they feel they can acquire more units faster. We believe that if we stay focused in South Carolina, we'll start right here in Columbia first and get to a good scalable point, and get us to a position where we have a lot of assets under management. And then we'll start strategically moving across the Southeast, just like we've done with fund clients in the past. There is large amounts of inventory in this space. None of your institutional investors are paying attention to things that they have very tight buy boxes. So they want things that are 3-bedroom, at least 1.5 bath, not built after like 1980 typically, or before 1980. So we're kind of opening up this wide range of inventory in areas that greatly need improvement. So a lot of your houses that hit the market, let's take, North Main, for example. We have there's a lot of inventory in that area that ranges sub $50,000 that may need $40,000, $50,000 worth of work. It doesn't make sense for flippers to do that, those deals. It doesn't make sense for institutional investors to do those deals. So we're opening up a range of inventory that will allow us to go into areas, do really high quality renovations on properties, and also keep the rents underneath the affordability range. iBuyer is not really anything here we need to touch on. It just allows us to get access to more inventory, and allows us to help individual homeowners that may be in difficult positions. I think this is going to be incredibly important going forward after we start to see some of the blowback from COVID. The majority of individuals who may be in a position that they're nearing foreclosure, or are in a short sale position, we want them to be able to sell their homes to the nonprofit and lease them back from the nonprofit and work themselves back to a position to purchase the property back. There's a lot of different things that we can do with the appropriate resources and spread to the community that will allow individuals different choices in a price point that's not typically attractive for iBuyers or large investors. As we said, the nonprofit mix is very important. And there are two main reasons it's important. One is on a tax liability side. As you guys know, one of the biggest struggles that I had initially in forming my career in institutionals was that I was in South Carolina. Our tax burden on non-owner occupied properties is significant. And even if I wanted to start a for-profit affordable housing fund in the private equity space, it would be near impossible in this market because of the tax liability. So having some form of tax break, being a nonprofit is extremely important, and will help us use that additional revenue and money savings to go back into purchasing more assets and keeping things within the affordability range. We'll have access to other capital, not just liquidity that the for-profit will end up providing, but we'll go after foundations, grants, all of the things that we would typically do in the nonprofit space. Public services, the two main things that we're focusing on, one is green renovations. Green renovations is a big passion of mine because of what we saw in the institutional sector. They would come in and do cosmetic renovations to properties, still leaving the properties in with bad windows, bad insulation. And so we would have someone that would have a $1,100 a month rent with a $700 a month utility bill. So making sure that the properties are optimized from a overall energy conservation standpoint is really important, not only to us as an organization, but also to our residents who greatly impacts their affordability overall. And then of course, financial coaching is one of the biggest aspects and one of my biggest passions in the sector is giving people access to information on how to improve their financial position over time. So we can get them in something that will help them budget their money more effectively, and then teach them how to budget their money and save and get into a position, if they want to buy, that they can buy the property that they're in from the nonprofit, or just an overall improving of their financial position over time is something that is really important to us. So we'll work through, initially when they come to us, we'll take them through the process of applying for a property that'll include a budget worksheet and workshop that'll take them through the initial part of their tenancy, that they can either come to, hopefully after COVID, we can have live classes, but we're going to put together Zoom classes and also webinars for our overall resident base to learn and grow their financial health over time. Leadership team we have a large team here, but these are our three main. Me, of course, Jennifer Gunnels that we talked about already, Dustin Dreer, who is on the renovation side. So he runs all of the renovation and development stuff for our team. So I'm going to unshare my screen, and then I can take any questions that anybody has.
Thank you, Lauren. And I'm gonna see if anybody has any questions. I just had a couple. It looked like although headquartered here, you're doing in lots of areas. Do you know offhand how many properties you have here in the Columbia area? And have you set a goal about how many units, affordable units you want to add to the market in the next few years?
Yeah, so From what we've acquired here locally, it's been about 700 units. So those were not units that we own; those were units owned by our investors. So we led the acquisition and renovation and purchase and management of those assets, but they are not ours personally. Right now, the nonprofit is approved in South Carolina. We're waiting on 501c3 status, which we should have any day now. Our goal for the first year is 500 units in Columbia. So it's an aggressive goal, but it is much lower than what we would do on the institutional side for institutional investors. So we're trying to find a middle ground. If I was coming in as if we would have gone the route of being a traditional private equity fund, then we would have wanted to be at 1,000 units within our first 12 months, which is what our goals were with individual clients that we would bring into a market to start up.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Guys, other questions? Just jump in. Sam?
I do have a question, Ms. Lauren. Are you also doing rental, like rent to own, or is this just leasing and renting?
Good question. So the initial model that I built a few years ago was going to be on the lease, like rent to own side. What I found from a regulation standpoint is that rent to own is typically not in the benefit of the individual. It's only in the benefit of the investor themselves. So what we want to do is allow people the ability to rent in our program. We help them get to a point that they can buy the asset that they live in from the nonprofit. So there'll be an option to purchase the property at the cost that we have into the property back to the resident. But we're not going to do a traditional rent to own model because we find that in the majority of cases, if the resident changes their mind at some point in the process, then they've actually lost more money than they've gained by being in that program. So we find the other way to be more advantageous to the actual resident themselves.
Sam, did you get unmuted? And then Jeff?
Yes,
and then Brian,
I
did you
did.
have a question too?
Let me say this. I kind of like what I'm hearing. It's kind of a new model to some extent, but I think one of the elements that's appealing to me, and I think to certain parts of the city, is that there's some interest in really renting and putting quality into the rental units. And also that is I think good for people who may have low income, who would have to, tackle the rent, also tackle the utility bills. And so, but I also think that there's some people, I think most of us know as we move around, that may have been renting a unit, maybe two for, let's say, 3-4 years, 20 years. Those are still on the market. And they tend to have a challenge also in terms of dollars to keep it, help meet the codes and those kind of things. So I'm looking forward to learning more about what you're doing in this particular model. And the national numbers when it comes to low income rental units it's amazing.
It is.
Having to compete with middle income folks as well.
Well, I appreciate that, Councilman, and I think that the thing that we found is that because it is a different model hack, you get the ability to really invest on the properties on the front end. Funds will cut corners on renovations and these are for market rental properties at above market rents. They'll still cut corners because they need their numbers to be a certain way to get the outcome that they want in the end. And they're only going to hold the properties for 7 to 10 years, and they're going to sell them anyway. So they don't really care. The nonprofit will own the properties in perpetuity unless a resident buys it back from us. So for us, it's really important to renovate them to the highest quality standard at the beginning. So we want to make sure that they're insulated the way that they should be, that the windows are high quality, that overall the construction is green, so that they have good energy efficiency over time. But not only that, that the plumbing is working appropriately, and we can invest that money on the front end because of how the structure is built. The upfront investment doesn't impact the growth of the nonprofit over time. So it gives us more flexibility to do everything that we need to on the front end, which will also go a long way to contribute to areas that need that type of investment into them. There's a lot of, properties that are run down or need a lot of work that traditional investors, and it's not to their fault in a lot of cases, they just don't make sense from an investment standpoint. They can't invest the amount of money that needs to be invested into them and make any money on the back end, which, if you can't make money, then, and that's your goal, then it's understandable. But there's a lot of areas that could use this type of investment, and it could change the makeup of areas and bring more life to areas that really need that type of attention.
Jeff, and then Brian.
Lauren, thank you for your presentation. When you make a concentrated focus on buying properties and your numbers, you're using 500 units, 1,000 units, what type of metric do you concentrate on to purchase kind of in a bulk perspective? Most kind of nonprofit organizations work with single family doors, like you said, 1 to 4 doors, but that's significant number of properties in order to amass a number of 500 to 1,000 units. The difficulty arises if you try to build new units and the pushback that the communities tend to press upon the developer or redeveloper. What strategies do you use to buy purchases more than a door at a time so that you can accumulate that 500 units?
Great question, Jeff. So it will probably be shocking to most, but if we look at those 1,900 units that we did, those were one-off purchases. There was 0 portfolios. They were individual purchases of single-family properties direct to sellers. And we did that by, one, if you have purchasing power, then you get property. From an institutional perspective, that's how they can come in and just run a market. One of the reasons why we're seeing this big jump in home price appreciation is because the majority of individual consumers are competing with institutional capital, and they've got cash and they can close in 14 days. So it's hard to be attractive as an individual purchaser who's got a mortgage, who's going to take 30 to 45, 60 days to close. We can really beat the majority of, now I'm putting on my institutional cap, right? We can really beat the majority of consumers on that side very rapidly by having the purchasing power and the ability to move as quickly as we do. So that's how we accumulated as much as we did. We have big internal processes and teams here. So we have an acquisition division that does the underwriting, the offer creation, the negotiation, the diligence, all of those pieces. We have a renovation division. When we were at full scale, between 1099 and internal employees, we were employing well over 1,000 people in South Carolina because you have not only the internal functions, but you also have renovations and maintenance and all of the aspects of running the field. So for us, it will actually be incredibly easier than what we dealt with institutional clients, because the inventory that we're going after and that we're looking to purchase doesn't have any competition. And there's some competition in everything, but for the most part, it's wide open. Your large investors aren't paying attention to it. no one's really focused on that particular avenue because they're highly distressed assets that need a lot of work, that are in areas with low overall values, so they can't get the value back out, or areas that traditionally have really low rents, so it's not attractive to any of your larger players. So we could actually come in and buy a lot of inventory much faster. Our only limitation is capital. If we can attract, and that's the reason for the hybrid mix, because if we can attract institutional type capital into a model that will give them a base return. So for capital investment, we're looking for venture debt, for example, from banks or from large investors. So we'll say we'll give them an 8% return on their money in exchange for the liquidity to keep running the system and purchasing more properties. The inventory won't run out unless we had an absorbent amount of capital, and then we'll just continue to expand and acquire as much as we can. But we'll go through auctions. Direct to banks is a great strategy we've used before, and especially direct to distressed homeowner is even better. This time we can just sleep better at night knowing that we can do the right thing for the owner. Before we were stealing properties from people because we had the capital to do it, which is one of my biggest reasons for exiting that space and trying to focus on this one.
Brian?
Yeah. First off, thank you, Lauren, for the presentation, and thank you for being willing to accept housing choice vouchers. That's obviously something that's not particularly common and much appreciated. And I see Ivory nodding as well. So as I was listening to your presentation, I was kind of thinking through, how does this resemble or not resemble various things that I'm familiar with in sort of the subsidized affordable housing space. One was actually tax credits because of the structure you were describing, and I think you walked through why you felt like your model had some additional positive features, or at least hit a different niche in the market. The other thing that came to mind was community land trusts, which seem to have sort of a similar architecture to them, and I didn't quite hear the same sort of thing from you to talk about that. So why do you think your model is superior from a community perspective to a community land trust or other shared equity approach?
Yeah, great question. So I think the overall ideal of a community land trust is fantastic. I like that model. The issue is that it doesn't give you enough power. And that's a very straightforward way to put it, but it's true. If I'm looking at, so let's take one of our last big clients. They came out of the gate with 50 million. They quickly went to 100 million within 4 months. So they had 50 million in purchasing power. They went to 100 million. Within 4 months of that, they had 150 million. Within 2 years, they were at 250 million. So you have a lot of purchasing power. Without being able to max that purchasing power, there's just not enough equity within the community base in order to generate that type of money. And so you need more money to do more good. If I'm running up against them and they're creating more inventory than we can, then their cause is going to get pushed above ours. And so in order to start to balance this out, there's always going to be a market for institutional anything. There's going to be high, type A multifamily properties that charge $2,500 a month in rent. That we don't have is focus on the low income side, but we'll also focus on the middle income side. So we want to make sure that we're providing affordable units across the board that do everything from vouchers to just actual affordable units that'll be based on like the average income in the area. But that was one of my biggest decisions around how to structure the model, was what is going to give me a plug into access to institutional scale money to make a difference faster. If we want to duplicate and grow, my personal goal is that we'll be in 12 states in the next 5 to 10 years. So we want to grow really quickly. And in order to do that and make significant impacts, it's one thing for us to come in and say, oh yeah, we're a nationwide company in 10 years, but we only have 100 assets per market. Then for us to really come in and be able to build scale in a market really quickly. So that 500 to 1,000 unit range is really your sweet spot to really start to see true community impact that will go back to the residents. So that was my approach or thought process on the community land stuff.
Yeah. Councilwoman Devine, can I add a comment? Earlier in the presentation, Lauren had mentioned the partnership with the Housing Authority, and I just want to add a comment with that. A few months ago, we released a solicitation for to engage a property management services to do property management, particularly with our units that we currently have under our nonprofit arm. And we were very excited when Lauren and her team responded and just really loved the model. And so we recently awarded a contract with them to oversee about 400 of our units. And the developments are Bayberry Muse, Capitol Heights, which is a single family affordable rental model, Celia Saxon 1 and 2, T.S. Martin, Bentley Courts, and Rosewood student housing. So we're excited about engaging in that relationship and partnership with Lauren and her team, and really doing the work to put in the capital needed to transition those units. They are have some significant deferred capital needs, but we have a very aggressive plan to address those properties and bring them up to new standards. So we're very excited about that, but I just wanted to add that comment.
Thanks. We are very, very excited. I think it's what we're most excited about overall is that we've learned so much valuable information and valuable ways of running operations from the private sector that we really feel we can use to reposition and help change how things are being positioned or how properties are being ran. I think we can contribute a lot there. So we're really excited to be partnered with you guys and to help.
So we're going to go ahead and wrap this portion up unless anybody else has a burning question for Lauren.
Yes, Tamika, just one more thing. First of all, I'm glad that was going to be part of my question. That's awesome that I'm hearing that they're partnering with housing. And once these partnerships start, a lot of the women, like even out here, they desire to be homeowners. They desire to actually have a home and to get out of the apartments. So my question is, will you all be also trying to pass on the education of the financial coaching to the single families and how they can pick themselves up and become homeowners eventually? Even, they remove themselves out of the apartments and move into actual home ownership type thing, over time. Will y'all be offering that financial coaching to y'all people under housing and the nonprofit sector?
Yeah, so
yes,
go ahead, Ms.
Yes, the Housing Authority do have a home ownership component. We have a certified housing counselor person on our staff who facilitates working with our families, and so we will be engaging in more of those conversations with our new property management team so that we can get that information to all of our families.
Yeah, I think, and we're excited to be a resource. We want to be a resource to like this council and committee, for example, other nonprofits that are in the sector. We just want to help, and I think if everybody kind of works together, then we can start to make a dent in the issues that we have. So any way that we can be a resource, anybody reach out to us. We're more than happy to brainstorm, help, or contribute resources any way that we can.
Ms. Devine, I do have one thing, and I think it can be answered in 30 seconds. But I do think that oftentimes we get these presentations, they're really awesome. We don't always leave with tangibles. So Lauren, if you could just give us As you move forward with this, what are you looking for from the community? And for those of us that sit on the task force, what can we do?
Yeah, biggest action items for us is we're looking to make connections. I've spent, admittedly, the majority of my career meeting people everywhere but here. So the majority was, private equity, which is West Coast, Northeast. And so we're really trying to dive into community connections. Those will be really helpful to us from literally every angle. So we're making connections with local banks. So anybody that has connections there, that's really useful. If there's other nonprofits that you feel like would be good for us to collaborate with, we would love to meet and talk to them. And we just want to gather and start to garner overall community support and actual knowledge of what we're doing. So helping talk about us and expose what we're trying to do as we move into raising money and starting to purchase assets will all be beneficial.
Great. And as all of our meetings, this will be on the city's website and YouTube. People can see your presentation, and then committee members, Erica will make sure that Lauren's presentation, along with her contact information, will be sent to you guys. So,
Awesome.
So thank you, Lauren. Thank you, Jen. We appreciate it. Y'all are welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting
Thanks
if
for
you
having
like,
us.
but if you have to drop off, we certainly understand. Mary Louise, I think we've got your audio back, so I wanted to circle back with you and make sure that you had an opportunity to introduce yourself and everyone know that you are part of our task force, and we're so excited to have you.
Can you all hear me now?
Yes, we can.
I'm Mary Louise Resch. I am the Director of Philanthropy for Central South Carolina Habitat for Humanity. I am so glad that we heard the question about affordable home ownership, because that's an area where we focus. We also work on neighborhood revitalization. We do home repairs. We do aging in place. We also we have a newer model that we're embracing, a community one block at a time. And if anyone would like to see how that model works, I put my information in the chat box. We would love to give you a ride with Roy Kramer, who's our executive director. I almost missed this meeting, and I apologize for all of the misses, but it seems like with COVID, something's always going wrong. But the good news is today we were able to actually dedicate another house in the city of Casey for a young mom and her family. So if people are interested in partnering with us on home ownerships, we represent Richland, Lexington, and Fairfield counties. This fall we're working in Casey. We'll be back over in Lexington in the spring. We will be in Richland next fall, Richland next fall, actually in the city of Columbia, building and rehabbing some homes. So if anyone is interested in partnering with us, again, my contact information is in the chat box, and we'd love to host you so you can, it's one thing to tell you what we do, it's another thing to actually take you out on site and see the difference that we're making in neighborhoods.
Good. Well, we're excited to have you part of our task force, Mary Louise, and we understand everybody on here has crazy busy schedules, so we certainly understand when people can't sign on, but we want to make sure that you're getting information, and even if you can't be here, if you want to send information our way, please do that. So thank you so much for being here. Y'all, I want to make sure that we be very good stewards of your time, so we may not get to all the committee reports, but I did, and Brenna emailed me and said she wasn't going to be able to be here, but Jennifer, I think, do you have that information? Jennifer and Brenna, their committees met together, and there was some information, I think very rightfully so, wanted to bring back to the full committee to make sure that we were operating under the same definition of affordable housing, and could hear back from them on some of the discussions. So Jennifer, I'm gonna kick it over to you right now.
And I'll be quick because I know we want to have the opportunity for the other committees to report. So our partnership committee had a joint meeting with public awareness and education. We just felt like those two committees just fit so perfectly together, creating networks of groups and individuals that have an interest in affordable housing, and then also providing that education efforts. So we met jointly. Brett and I talked a couple times, and I think we do have a really strong interest in those committees working very closely together. But the one thing we wanted to bring to you is really the need to have messaging for this entire group to make sure that we are being consistent, using consistent definitions of affordable housing, common messaging, talking about the benefits and who specifically can benefit from affordable housing, the need that we have for affordable housing versus the stock that's available. So we know that's plentiful information that's out there, but we think it would be important to get that condensed into bullet points for all of us to make sure that we're being consistent when we're out there in the public. So what we'd like to do, and again, I'm rushing through so we can get to other reports, but we would like to put probably a request into the City Communications Department. We've had an email conversation with Ms. Utsi, who directs that department, to possibly get their help or other departments to help us craft that messaging. But the one request we had from this group is if anyone has a particular interest or expertise or could recommend someone, we want to make sure that we're including those voices. So I'll put my email in the chat if you don't have that. So again, if you have an interest or an expertise that you want to lend particularly to that messaging effort, or again, recommend somebody, if you'll let us know that so that we can start working on that. Or if folks have other thoughts on the messaging aspect, I thought that would be a good thing to talk about now.
Thank you, Jennifer. Does anybody have any questions for Jennifer regarding that report or anything that she said? No. Okay, seeing none, and yes, Jennifer and Brenner, we're going to submit something to PR, our for communications support, but we definitely want to make sure that we are doing messaging. And I think for that, I think also is key for us to be operating under the same definition of affordable housing. I know 2 presentations ago when we were, I think when Brian gave his presentation, and also when we heard the presentation from National League of Cities, we talked a lot about kind of what the standard definition is nationally, and then what the 80% median income, and then the other parts, what it means for Columbia. But I do think as far as messaging, we need to be very concise and consistent on the messaging that we give. Right now, we know that people use affordable housing, workforce housing. Sometimes people confuse public housing, which is a form of affordable housing, but we need to make sure that we are consistent on our messaging. So I do want to dedicate a little bit more time at our next meeting as a conversation item, so that we can kind of come up with some ideas, and maybe by then we'll have some messaging examples to give you guys. But I would like y'all to think about that between now and next month, because I think that if we can start 2021 off with a very clear and concise message as far as what we're communicating and what we're doing, I think it'll help as we bring these other partners to the table. Okay, so thank you, Jennifer, I appreciate that. Julianne also was not able, she said she was gonna try and jump on, and I told her, please don't try and stress. I don't think I see her, so I don't think she did. So I don't have a report from the Accessibility Committee. Reggie also was not able to join us. He's doing a site visit, so he did email me. And so we'll make sure next month, I think he does have some ideas as far as financing, so we want to hear from them next month. Lala Anna, do you and Sue have anything that you want to report out regarding legal and zoning? I know you reported last month. I wasn't sure if there's anything additional this month. Oops, I think she's gone. Okay. Lala Anna had to jump off too, so we don't have anything. And then Jennifer, you already spoken. So with that said, that is the committee report outs. Now I just want to kind of move to announcements to see where we are. Number one, if there's anything that any of your organizations are working on as an organization, or any information you individually want to share as far as announcements. So I'm actually, for just kind of keep consistency, I'm going to start with my screen and where I am and go from there. So I'm going to go to Tanya. Do you want to make any announcements? Is there anything from the residents' perspective or anything that you guys got going over there that you want to report out?
Nothing big going on right now. I would like some information to hand out to the residents. I have been having a lot of questions about any programs that they could possibly get into. A lot of young ladies are getting jobs and looking to get some financial coaching, as well as trying to, like with Mary Louise, I always give out the Habitat information. They've been so great in helping communities, but other organizations that they could possibly join, and also, like I said, get some financial coaching and any information I can get to give them to help them move forward in trying to move out of the community. We would love for the community to get fixed up, but until then, a lot of families are living in desired needs. A lot of things are not fixed, and a lot of things are going on. So a lot of families really looking to move out. So just any information I could give them will be greatly appreciated, and that's from anyone in the group.
Okay. Gloria, can you and I circle back around maybe towards the end of this week? And then if anybody has any resources that your organizations have that you want to combine, Gloria, let's just pull together something, not just for the families in North Point and Colony, but that's probably something that we need to have ready and available to give out to a lot of different areas.
Yes, ma'am. Just let me know when.
Thanks. All right, Miss Ivory Matthews. I know y'all had a big, or I think y'all are working on some things, but do you have any announcements that you want to make?
Certainly. Recently released a solicitation for development partners, and we are super excited about the responses that we received from various affordable housing development partners across the country. And our board, we met with our board last week, and they approved for us to proceed with discussions with various development partners. And so what that means for the Housing Authority is that we are looking at pretty much touching every single unit that we own, and doing some comprehensive renovation of those units, and also developing new affordable units on properties, on our vacant properties. So we're very excited about that. We'll be announcing more as soon as we finalize the details of each of those agreements with our various development partners. And we will certainly be making that information available to the community. And at some point, we'll be looking for feedback from the public on what we plan in each of our development opportunities. And if I know some of you receive e-blast or communications from our agency, and for those of you who currently have not received any e-blast, we do a lot of communications to that e-blast portal from our website, announcing any updates that are coming from the Housing Authority. And so what I'll do, if you're not added, I'll go through our list and add you on there. Or you can visit our website and sign up for news and events, and you'll receive that information as it's made available to the public.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Jim, do you have anything from More Justice or from you individually that you want to share?
There we go. I can report back on the Charleston referendum. Unfortunately, it failed by a slight margin. Our group worked hard with the council to get that to the point where it was at a referendum. We're stepping back to look at what we can do. We think part of the problem was just education. People didn't know what the referendum was for, but it did fail by a small margin. We're continuing to work with the powers in Columbia to put our trust fund on a referendum in the future. So, but it was a disappointment in Charleston, especially for our group.
Well, Jim, and if you recall, the referendum for the transportation failed the first time in Charleston and then passed.
Yeah.
I mean, it failed the first time here and passed. So sometimes with referendums, it takes a point or two, but getting it on ballot is huge.
Yeah, it was, and we think the timing with the COVID, with the unemployment rate, I don't think that went in our favor. So we're excited. We're still we're going to work on both areas, and hopefully we can put something together in the near future.
Great. Jeff, anything to report from Family Promise?
Yes, I'll be brief. While we've really seen an uptick in families experiencing homelessness, and without our shelters being able to host, without our congregations being able to host them, we've really had to find creative solutions for them. So we're working on building partnerships for various rentals and different welcome homes that our churches may have to shelter our families, also while keeping the families that have graduated from our program stable, and really focusing on the child and youth development during this time to make sure that the trauma of homelessness in the current times don't spill over onto them, and really doing a lot of work to build more affordable housing. And Clayton Homes actually donated a house to us, so we're really excited about that and excited to bolster that relationship in the future.
Thank you. Hey, Shayla, you've had some great successes in your development, but is there anything you want to report out or announce what you have?
Just excited that the last 3 houses for DH Swinton Point closed this week. So everybody will be in before the holidays, and we're so excited for them. I think it's really important to highlight that they're all 8 families from all different walks of life. I think they're a great representation of what affordable housing is, especially since you've got millennials who just recently graduated from college. I know we closed one at your office, and she's 23 years old and just got her degree, and now she can afford a home for purchase. That's her first thing that she wanted to do. She said she didn't want to rent because she lived her life renting. So her goal was to own a house. So that was a really great victory story coming out of DH Swinton Point. And I'm just super excited that I hope there's more. I've been talking to the developers about where the next ones are going to go in partnership with Mungo. So hopefully I'll get some news in 2021 about if we can put more homes down. But you guys got to see these houses. They're beautiful. They've got granite and nothing what you think affordable housing looks like, which is also a great point to that point. So I can also share pictures if anybody wants to see, because it's really good to change what people think affordable housing looks like as well. But everybody there is really happy. So you'll see a little bit more life on Reed Street. I'm excited about it.
Great. Congratulations. Dr. Grady, any announcements that you have?
Sure. So a lot of my attention recently has been focused on evictions. As I'm sure you're all aware, there is a partial CDC moratorium that is set to expire at the end of the month. And you may have seen me on television lately. I've been interviewed by Channel 19 yesterday, Channel 57 last week, speaking about the numbers of tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of renters in South Carolina facing eviction if that moratorium is not extended, if there's not some action at the federal level. The one thing I do want to highlight, and I can't talk in too much detail because I don't have the details, but SD Housing is working with a number of partners to try to come up with more resources for a renter and homeowner assistance fund of some sort. Hopefully we're going to be able to announce that in the near future, but the plan is it will be sort of like, if any of you remember the SC Help program that we did a number of years ago, where we're going to be relying on nonprofits of local governments, other community actors to sort of find people who need help and do paperwork. So we're hopefully going to have an RFP out in the near future about that. So just want to kind of put the seed out there that we know there's going to be a problem next month, and we are doing a lot of work to try to get something in place in the near future. So aside from that, just sort of we've put out some reports recently, our agency's annual report and so forth. And there should be some additional volumes of the housing needs assessment coming out in the near future. So that's what I'm up to, and that's what SC Housing is doing.
Great. All right. And I think that is, oh, Dylan, do you have anything you want to add?
Yes, ma'am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Sorry, I had to hop in the car and you guys keep cutting in and out. But I did just want to say, as far as mutual aid goes, we are seeing another uptick in calls regarding utilities and rent. And certainly most of what we do is connecting them to resources and helping them navigate the process of connecting to those resources. So we spend a lot of time on 211, working with SC Thrive and all of you as different organizations that provide those resources. So my reason for saying that, number one, is just saying that we on the ground, if you will, are certainly seeing another uptick as we get into this season of people who are in need. But in doing that, we have also created kind of a resource roadmap. And so it's kind of like if you're experiencing at risk of eviction, or if you are struggling to pay utilities, here are the organizations, here's this step. And so as you all were talking, it might benefit if I could share that with you, Ms. Devine, and maybe connect with you guys as you're having these meetings to put more resources on there. But it could also be another resource that certainly we don't want to hoard it. We want to share it with the community as well. So we might want to talk about that.
Great. Yeah. And definitely, I would love to. I get a lot of calls, and so to have something like that for me to send out, I would like that. Okay, great. So I'm not going to go through staff individually. I'm just going to open it up to Gloria, Krista, Lee, Missy, do y'all have any of y'all want anything that the city's doing that you want to make sure everybody's aware of, or any announcements that you guys have?
No, ma'am, not here. Thank you.
Ms. Devine, I'll just tell you, this is Missy. Gloria and Krista and I have been communicating. We'll work with Leisha's office to pull definitions out of our consolidated plan and comprehensive plan to give us a draft to start with.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, so then I guess I will end with one announcement and I guess one action item to think about between now and January. Announcement is the first session for the Color of Law will be this Thursday at 6. If you guys have not had an opportunity to register, it's still not too late. As of last Thursday, the report I got is that we have 300 folks registered to participate in that first session, which I'm really excited about. And I've since then been personally reaching out to folks because I do want to make sure that we have a diverse group of people out there. But we've got an amazing panel that will be moderated by Warren Bolton from the state, formerly from the state paper. But we have a reporter, Rebecca Lipsome from the state paper, Stuart Andrews, who's an attorney who worked a lot with urban renewal lawsuits back in the day. And then we've got 2 residents, Franchot Brown, who lived in Waverly when it went through its gentrification, and Reverend Darby, who lived in Willow Hill. So it'll be a very good, engaging conversation. We will have questions and answer period at the end, and I'm really excited. So want to make sure that you guys were aware of that. If you are registered, and then you also know others that want to register, please make sure you share it with your networks. Because out of this, this will be a great conversation, but it won't do what it needs to do in our community if community folks don't participate in the conversation. Those of us who kind of live and are passionate about these issues, of course, will have an interest. Most people might think, oh, that sounds too intellectual, or, oh, really, I don't want to have that conversation. But in order for us to have the results that we want as far as equity in our community, we need everybody part of the conversation. So that is my announcement. And then my thing that I just want to say is we talked about this at I think our very first meeting, but now that we're kind of 6 months in, and Brian, I'm asked, I'll circle back with you. Maybe you and I can start this conversation and have it for discussion for our next meeting. But in addition to discussing a definition for affordable housing, out of that, I would like for us to come up with a goal that we would like to recommend to City Council to make for adding affordable housing units in our market over the next 5 years or 10 years or whatever we think is reasonable. A lot of cities that have made really strides, they have that goal and that metrics they're using as a metrics to make sure that they are hitting the problem. And I think that council will be open to that, and Sam can echo. I think council will be open to that, but we'll need a recommendation, and I think that should be the first recommendation that we as a task force make. And if we can make that in January, that'd be great, because it could possibly make it into the mayor's State of the City address, which would be something that will be shared with the entire city and the region. So that is my last thing. Sam, do you have anything, any closing remarks or announcements you want to make? You're on mute.
No, I think this one I enjoyed. Of course, we always scattered, but everything's what I've always expected. And I think giving city council policymakers some goals for the future is can't get no better than that. And you're right, most major cities that have made progress, that's what they do. It's important that they know that that we're looking to you for answers and guidance, and we take your recommendations seriously. And way to go.
All right. Well, with all hearts and minds clear, guys, thank you so much. Y'all, happy holidays, everybody. We pray that you all have a very safe and happy holiday. Continue to wear your mask. We know this is going to be a difficult season for many reasons for folks, and we just want to keep everybody in our prayers that they have a safe and as happy of a holiday season as they can have. And then let's come back in 2021 with some really bold, audacious goals to knock them out the park. I know this is the team that can do it. So with that said, bye guys. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye everybody.